What is the creepiest and most unexplainable paranormal experience you've ever had? The haunted walk-up. Back in my early 20s, I lived in a small, old two-bedroom apartment in Toronto. It was one of those three-story walk-ups with creaky stairs and worn-out wood floors. Just a few days after I moved in, my roommate Mike gave me a hard time one morning. He said I had been banging on the wall between our bedrooms and pacing around the apartment all night. I had no idea what he was talking about because I had not done any of that. We figured maybe he was dreaming or maybe it was noise from one of the other units. We laughed it off and forgot about it. But the thing is, it kept happening night after night. Not long after that, I began noticing something strange in my own bedroom. Every now and then, this awful smell would fill the room. It was like cheap perfume mixed with mold and something even worse. Picture clothes from an old person's closet left on a damp basement floor next to a cat litter box that no one had cleaned in weeks. That was the scent. The oddest part was that I always felt this heavy, uneasy feeling in my chest a few seconds before the smell came. Like something terrible was about to happen. Mike bailed on me only 4 months into our 12-month lease, which meant I had to cover the full rent by myself until I could find someone else to move in. I decided to try sleeping in his old room to see if maybe the atmosphere in there was any better. That first night, I had one of the most vivid, disturbing nightmares I have ever had. In the dream, I was standing in the apartment's dim bathroom, staring into a cracked mirror that did not exist in real life. I was holding a big shard of glass and cutting into my own face. Felt real. Too real. After that, things only got worse. I started hearing loud banging sounds in the middle of the night. The toilet would flush on its own. Sometimes, out of nowhere, the hot water in the bathtub would turn on full blast during the night. One of the creepiest moments happened not long before I finally moved out. I woke up around 2 in the morning to the sound of the television blaring at full volume. It was playing the movie Poltergeist on City TV. That channel always showed movies late at night, so that part was not unusual. But this was an old analog television, the kind where you turn a dial to change channels or volume, and pull a knob to turn it on. It was not on a timer or anything fancy like that. Somehow it had turned itself on, full blast right in the middle of the night. And of all movies, Poltergeist was playing. That was the final straw for me. There was something wrong with that place, and I was not going to wait around to find out what it wanted. Me and Pete, the ghost. I once lived in a place that I'm pretty sure was haunted. It was a small apartment with just 2 rooms. The thing was, one of those rooms was locked and I never got the key. So all I had was one tiny space that acted as my kitchen, bedroom, and dining area, plus a screened-in porch. There were 2 things that really stuck with me. One night, my girlfriend stayed over. In the middle of the night, she woke up completely freaked out. She said she saw the bathroom door open and a dark figure standing inside, just watching her. The bathroom was right across from that locked room. The way she described it gave me chills. Another time, I shot out of bed when the fire alarm went off. It was blasting at full volume. I rushed over to pull the plug, and as soon as I got there, it just stopped. Dead quiet. No other alarms in the building were going off either. That one really got under my skin. Now, a lot of what happened in that apartment could have just been weird neighbors. But the way things happened, it never felt quite right. There was this tapping sound that came from the unit downstairs. It sounded like someone lightly hitting a spoon on a countertop, over and over again. It would go on for hours, even during the middle of the night. Maybe it was my neighbor, but I could never figure out why anyone would do that for so long, especially at those hours. I also used to hear knocking on the walls. Not loud banging. More like someone was tapping up the wall, almost like they were checking for a stud. And then there was this odd sound, kind of like moaning or a distant howl. It didn't seem to be coming from any specific apartment. Could have been a dog, I guess. But it didn't sound like one. The place across the hall from me? It had 3 different people move in and out during the year I lived there. I always figured maybe their apartment had the same creepy vibe or maybe even worse. Now, I had my own strange way of dealing with the whole thing. I decided to name the ghost Pete. That name came from some old mail I kept getting, addressed to a guy named Pete who must have lived there before me. I started talking to him sometimes like he was just a roommate I didn't hang out with. My girlfriend hated it. She was way more spooked than I was, and eventually, she stopped coming around. Since I was hardly ever home after that, I kept things light whenever I was. I even put a piece of paper on the table labeled Pete's Notes and told him if he had something to say, just write it down. I still don't know if I completely believe in ghosts, but I've always been curious about the unknown. That experience didn't give me any answers, but it sure nudged me closer to the idea that science doesn't have everything figured out just yet. The girl in the backyard. This happened when I was 17. Back when I was still living in the house I grew up in, I used to sneak out at night to meet up with friends. One night, I slipped out through the back door, like I had done before, but as I turned to pull the door closed behind me, I suddenly felt this strong sensation, like someone was watching me. My first thought was that I was caught. Maybe one of my parents had followed me. I turned to see who was there, and that's when I saw her. She looked like a young girl, but her whole body was in black, white, and gray. Her hair was the darkest black I have ever seen. Darker than black, almost like it was sucking in the light. Her skin was a washed-out grayish-white, like TV static frozen in place. She wore a dress somewhere in between black and white, and her face had no features. Just a smooth, blank shape facing me. She didn't move. She just stood there, staring. I panicked and reached for the door as quickly as I could. The moment I started to close it, it slammed shut faster than I expected, like something was hurrying me along. I took off across the yard and ran out into the street, heart racing. The whole way to my friend's house, I felt like something, or someone, was behind me. I stayed there that night. Not long after that, I was staying up late with my mom watching a movie. My dad had passed away not too long before, so it was a quiet time in the house. After the movie ended, we shut everything off, the television, the stereo receiver, and the DVD player, each with its own remote. We said goodnight and went to our rooms. Not long after I laid down, I was jolted awake by loud static blasting through the speakers. The television had turned itself on, but there was no signal, just white noise filling the room. My mom and I ran into the hallway at the same time, both of us confused and startled. The house was completely empty except for us. Years later, I was about 23 and had just graduated from college. I finally told my family about the night I saw that figure in the backyard. Before I could even finish describing what she looked like, my sister interrupted and finished the description for me. She told me that, years ago, she and her friend used to see a young girl playing in the backyard, wearing a sundress. She said the girl looked around 12. Turns out, our neighbor, who had been the original owner of the home, told us a story once. After the house was first built, a young couple had moved in with their daughter. Sadly, that little girl passed away from leukemia, and based on when it happened, she would have been about the right age. Thinking back on it now, the girl I saw that night was not frightening. Not really. My sister said the same thing. She was not trying to hurt anyone. She was just there, watching. One last thing I remembered later, my dog used to scare the life out of me. Sometimes, out of nowhere, he would stare down the hallway toward my sister's room, growling with his hair standing straight up. At the time, I never connected it to the girl. But after I saw her, it all made a little more sense. To this day, I still believe what I saw was real, and I have never seen anything like it since. Just past midnight. This one isn't about me personally, but something that happened in my family. My grandfather wasn't a good man. He was an alcoholic and violent, and at one point even tried to kill my grandmother while their children watched. One of the less awful things he did was abandon her when their 6 kids were all still young, every one of them under the age of 12. Over the years, a few of his children kept very limited contact with him. He lived around 30 or 40 miles away from my grandmother and the 2 kids who had stayed in the area. By the time he was in his 80s, his health started to decline. He was hospitalized and passed away in the middle of the night. Early the next morning, my aunt, his oldest daughter, headed to the morgue to identify his body and take care of the paperwork. But before she went there, she stopped by my grandmother's house to let her know what had happened. As soon as she stepped into the house, my grandmother looked up and said, "It's a sad day. He died just past midnight, I'd say." Now, at this point in her life, my grandmother had started showing signs of aging, maybe a bit of dementia, so comments like that weren't totally out of the ordinary. My aunt assumed that one of her siblings must have already called to break the news. She didn't think much of it and went on to the morgue. But when she got there and read over the death certificate, she froze. The time of death was listed as 12:10 a.m. Still processing what she'd just read, she made a second stop at my grandmother's place on her way home. She asked, "Who called you last night to tell you he died? How did you know it happened just after midnight?" My grandmother didn't even look up from what she was doing. She said, calm as anything, "He came to see me around 12:30. We had a talk. He wanted to say he was sorry for what he did to me and to you kids. I think he needed to make peace before he could move on. I'm glad he did." Then she went right back to humming and working on her jigsaw puzzle. To this day, none of us can explain how she knew. There were no phone calls, no messages, no contact from anyone before my aunt arrived. And yet, she knew the exact time and even described having a conversation with him not long after he died. That moment really stayed with our family. Whether you believe in spirits or not, it made many of us reconsider what might be possible, especially when someone has unfinished business. The man in the top hat. This is my first time sharing a story like this, but after reading others, I couldn't hold back. When I was growing up, my older brother and I used to see this strange dark figure in our house. It was tall, really tall, and always appeared as just a black silhouette, like a shadow without any features. The weirdest part? It wore a top hat. Picture something like what Abraham Lincoln used to wear. It would walk slowly down the hallway and stop right outside our bedroom doors. Just stand there, still. Then, after a moment, it would keep going and disappear. Every time we rushed into the hallway to catch a glimpse of it walking away, it would already be gone. I was always wide awake when it happened. It wasn't a dream. And my brother had his own creepy encounters. He said sometimes he'd wake up frozen, unable to move, with the figure standing silently at the foot of his bed. Then, just like that, it would vanish. We had a German Shepherd back then, and every time the figure appeared, the dog would bark like crazy. Not just once or twice. This went on for years. We'd see it multiple times a month, like clockwork. But after our parents split up and my mom moved out, it completely stopped. Years later, my brother and I were talking about it and casually mentioned the figure to our aunt, our mom's sister, while she was visiting. Her reaction shook us. She went pale and got super quiet. Then she told us that back when she and our mom were kids, she used to see the same exact thing, always when our mom was around. She said it would only show up if our mom was nearby. After that, we brought it up to our dad. And wouldn't you know it, he told us he saw the same thing too. All through the years he was with our mom. Every house, every state they lived in, that shadow man showed up. Eventually I asked my mom about it. She never said much, but one time she told me that when she was little and living in Massachusetts, there used to be this man in a top hat who followed her around. She never saw him as a shadow, just as a man. That's all she'd ever say about it. My mom passed away in 2012. And here's the part that still gives me chills. About 30 minutes before I found out she had died, I saw the top hat shadow again, for the first time in over 10 years, standing there just like before. That was also the last time I ever saw it. The voice behind the bed. Number of letters, 3912. A bit late to the thread, but I've got one that still haunts me. Back when I was in the military, we stayed in a training camp that had a long-standing reputation for being haunted. The place was isolated, deep in the middle of an island used strictly for military purposes. No civilians, no kids, just soldiers. First, it was small things. We'd lose gear or find stuff moved around, like ending up inside zipped bags or under bunks. We all just brushed it off as forgetfulness or pranks. Nothing that weird. Then came a night none of us could explain. It was lights out, and we were all settling into our bunks. One of my buddies was still texting his girlfriend, phone tucked under his blanket. Out of nowhere, he heard someone walking down the hallway, heavy footsteps, like boots dragging. Thinking it was the sergeant doing a round, he quickly stashed his phone under the pillow, turned over and pretended to be asleep. Then he heard a voice. Not the sergeant's. A soft voice. right next to him just on the far side of the bed. It said, "Don't worry, you can keep pretending." And it wasn't just him who heard it. About 5 of us, myself included, heard it too. We sat bolt upright, stunned. And the voice? It wasn't a man's voice. It was a little girl's. Let me say this again. We were on a secure, military-use-only island, in the middle of a forest. No civilians and definitely no children. Our bunk was separated from the main buildings. There was absolutely no reason a girl should have been anywhere near us. After that, things got worse. We had a weekend break and went home. But when we came back, something was waiting. On that same friend's bed was a bundle of long black hair, neatly tied together. Female hair. And tucked under his pillow was a note. Just 3 words. "Remember me?" Every door had been locked while we were gone. No one was supposed to enter the bunks. And we had no female recruits on the island at that time. We reported nothing. We didn't talk about it again. Even now, I still get chills thinking about it. Oh, and yeah, I'm from Singapore where this took place. Some of you from there might recognize the place. Pulau Tekong. A lot of guys who've done their training there have their own stories, and many are eerily similar. As for the phone, back then, military phones with cameras weren't allowed, so no photos, no proof. Was it a prank? Maybe. If so, it was next level. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw, and nothing's ever made sense of that night. The voice behind the bed, a bit late to the thread, but I've got one that still haunts me. Back when I was in the military, we stayed in a training camp that had a long-standing reputation for being haunted. The place was isolated, deep in the middle of an island used strictly for military purposes. No civilians, no kids, just soldiers. First, it was small things. We'd lose gear or find stuff moved around, like ending up inside zipped bags or under bunks. We all just brushed it off as forgetfulness or pranks. Nothing that weird. Then came a night none of us could explain. It was lights out, and we were all settling into our bunks. One of my buddies was still texting his girlfriend, phone tucked under his blanket. Out of nowhere, he heard someone walking down the hallway, heavy footsteps, like boots dragging. Thinking it was the sergeant doing a round, he quickly stashed his phone under the pillow, turned over, and pretended to be asleep. Then he heard a voice. Not the sergeant's. A soft voice. Right next to him, just on the far side of the bed. It said, "Don't worry, you can keep pretending." And it wasn't just him who heard it. About 5 of us, myself included, heard it too. We sat bolt upright, stunned. And the voice? It wasn't a man's voice. It was a little girl's. Let me say this again. We were on a secure, military-use-only island, in the middle of a forest. No civilians and definitely no children. Our bunk was separated from the main buildings. There was absolutely no reason a girl should have been anywhere near us. After that, things got worse. We had a weekend break and went home. But when we came back, something was waiting. On that same friend's bed was a bundle of long black hair, neatly tied together. Female hair. And tucked under his pillow was a note. Just 3 words. "Remember me?" Every door had been locked while we were gone. No one was supposed to enter the bunks. And we had no female recruits on the island at that time. We reported nothing. We didn't talk about it again. Even now, I still get chills thinking about it. Oh, and yeah, I'm from Singapore where this took place. Some of you from there might recognize the place. Pulau Tekong. A lot of guys who've done their training there have their own stories, and many are eerily similar. As for the phone, back then, military phones with cameras weren't allowed, so no photos, no proof. Was it a prank? Maybe. If so, it was next level. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw, and nothing's ever made sense of that night. Tyler's house. I was around 10 years old when this happened, staying over at my best friend Tyler's place. His family lived up on a mountain in Georgia, in one of those big, beautiful houses that look like something out of a magazine. But Tyler had always told me creepy stuff went on there. He'd mention how sometimes he'd see glowing eyes, or how the TV would just shut off on its own while he was watching. He heard drilling noises, metal banging, doors creaking open, all the typical haunted house stuff. I didn't believe any of it, until one night changed everything. We were chilling in the hot tub out back, just relaxing. We'd been out there for about an hour when I suddenly got this powerful gut punch urge to get out of the water. Before I could even say anything, Tyler looked straight at me, dead serious, and said, "We need to get out, now." And I could hear the fear in his voice. We jumped out, grabbed our towels, and rushed inside. He locked the door behind us and even double-checked it to make sure. Clicked it, pulled it, definitely locked. We headed toward the movie area near the back of the house to watch Napoleon Dynamite. We didn't even make it to the couch before that same cold dread came crashing down again. Then came the smell. Something awful like rotting meat. And right then, Tyler's DVD rack tipped over out of nowhere, and all the movies scattered across the floor. At that exact moment, the back door we had just locked flew wide open. We ran full speed up the stairs to the other movie room. We barricaded ourselves inside with beanbags and chairs, built a little fort like kids do when they're trying to hide from something they can't explain. That was the night I stopped doubting Tyler's stories. I became a believer real quick. And that wasn't the last strange thing to happen at his place. Bonus story, but with maybe a rational answer. Now, Tyler's dad was a hunter and he owned some really nice gear. One of our favorite things to mess with was his high-end walkie-talkies. One afternoon, Tyler and I were playing with them. He went across the street, and I stayed inside, watching him from the window. We were chatting back and forth over the walkies, talking about how cool they were. Then, out of nowhere, static hit the speaker. Then the sound of glass breaking. We both paused, confused. I remember staring right at him through the window as we both went silent. And then it happened. Through the static, this deep, chilling voice came through. Way too deep to be either of us. And it said, clear as day, "How's it going, scuba fire for?" Except it used my real name. Another glass-breaking sound, and then silence. Now, I always told myself it was someone who somehow tuned into the same frequency and had been listening in for a while. But the weirdest part is, I don't ever remember saying my name over the walkie. Not once. After that, I stopped playing with walkie-talkies. Just didn't feel right anymore.